Good evening and welcome everybody to History Cambridge's fall conversation, How Does Cambridge Unionize? My name is Beth Folsom and I'm the program manager at History Cambridge, and we're so pleased to have you here tonight to talk about unions, a little bit about the history of unions in Cambridge, but really pretty forward-looking about what the past couple of years has brought to the union movements in Cambridge, and what's next for these diverse and dynamic movements. Before we start our program, I want to recognize that our meeting here tonight at the Cambridge Public Library is on land that has traditionally been the ancestral homeland of the Massachusetts people. We acknowledge that this land is unceded and remains sacred to them, as well as to the Nipmuc and Wampanoag peoples. And it feels especially important to take a minute to think about this and to acknowledge our place in the grand history of this place that we now call Cambridge, especially because we are in the season of Thanksgiving and all that entails, the historical truth and myth making around that holiday. And if you're curious to know more about the indigenous history of this place that we call Cambridge, please check out our website, which is historycambridge.org, and we list some resources on our Indigenous Resource History Hub. And we hope to expand these resources in the coming year, so keep checking back. So I would love to introduce our speakers tonight, and they are going to give a little background about themselves and their union experience and what they do in their work, and then we will have a discussion. So our first guest is Bobby Travers, and he is from the Cambridge Education Association. And then we have Jonathan Tago, who is from the MIT Grad Student Union. And so we'll start with Bobby, because you're right next to me. And sorry about that.
Hi everybody, my name is Bobby Travers. I'm a paraprofessional at the PV School in North Cambridge, and I'm also the treasurer of the Cambridge Education Association. The CEA has been around since 1963. It used to be called the Cambridge Teachers Club. And then in 1965, when collective bargaining was permitted in Massachusetts for public employees, the Cambridge Teachers Association was formed. And currently we have about 1,500 members that serve the teachers, the paraprofessionals, the administrators, clerks, secretaries, and substitutes in the Cambridge Public Schools. And also there's about 2,000 public employees on the school department side that are union members in Cambridge.
Hi everybody, my name is Jonathan Tago. I'm a second year mechanical engineering student, master's student over at MIT, proud member of the MIT Grad Student Union, and member of the bargaining committee and representative for my department. MIT GSU is part of the United Electrical Workers, Local 256, and that, we got certified like a couple weeks ago, and we won our union election like 5 months ago, in April, 5, 6, 7 months ago, back in April. Pretty much we're in a fight right now with MIT for a fair and a strong contract to improve our living and research conditions, fighting for lab and workplace safety, international student worker rights, better housing, more affordable housing, pretty much everything to make our lives better at MIT, because we contribute so much as researchers, as the teaching assistants, as the people, or part of the group of people that really make MIT run. So, happy to be here, happy to talk with folks, and excited to get to this discussion. Is that enough?
That's wonderful, thank you. So I'm wondering if you could each speak a little bit about your history with unions and your impressions. Bobby, I'm assuming since you grew up with a union background in your family, you may have had a different kind of conception of it than Jonathan might have had. And I'm interested to know sort of what you came to the table with, and how that may have changed once you yourself were part of the union.
So my dad worked for Harvard University for 48 years, did the security and parking department, and he was a member of SEIU when he was local 223. And when I was a little kid, I used to go to union meetings when I was a shop steward and stuff. And it's interesting that it's the same issues back when my dad was that are currently at Harvard, especially with the students trying to organize a union. It was all about fair compensation, being allowed to organize and stuff. So it's interesting that, way back 30 years ago when my dad retired, and now 2022, it's really the same issues. Cambridge takes pride in being a union city, but both universities on either side of the city sometimes are not union friendly.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, so all my union experience kind of comes from organizing with the one I'm currently in. I started organizing with MIT GSU back in 2021. And pretty much, at least from my experience growing up and really, the community I grew up in, I always kind of knew that we are always so much stronger together when we're not like just isolated trying to figure out the world on our own. It's always just through the strength of all of us coming together, making stuff shake. That really kind of like pushes us to fight for better conditions and fight for a better life. So I always kind of knew that a union was the way to go, especially with MIT, because in my experience I'd seen so many instances of the administration simply not really listening to students about their concerns, about little things, about how their living conditions in their dorms are like, to larger things like when COVID happened and folks had to basically figure out where am I going to live for the next couple of months. And those instances where I saw that just MIT administration was not really taking in our input as undergraduate students at the time, and basically seeing that experience immediately porting it over to now as grad student workers. MIT are the people who not only employ us, these are people who are like our landlords, our housing, our healthcare and all that, and to see the same behavior of we don't really listen to what you have to say, and this is affecting like your life in like such a material way. It's like, no, my union made complete and other sense to me to get involved in and to see actually like materialize. So although my parents, I have no idea, I don't think they're either another part of a union, I always knew that that was just the type of vehicle to really see like our collective voices come together and see something change.
Thank you. I know you touched on, you both have touched on this a little bit, but can you expand a little bit on your particular industry, your particular sector, and the issues that your union is addressing or hoping to address? And Bobby, if you want to particularly tell us a little bit about the recent contract issues and discussions that you all have had.
So the Cambridge CEA currently doesn't have a contract actually do have a contract that's going to expire at the end of this school year. They're just starting negotiations, they're actually negotiating tonight. And it has to do with salaries, longevity, kind of was eliminated in 1995, but the current conditions are that the staffing, we're such short staff, people are not going into education. It's like open door. People are coming in, they're lasting 2 to 3 weeks, and then they're moving on. So it's job security, salaries, and also for Cambridge, our union has been in the issue of social justice, whether it be high stakes testing or welcoming other students, undocumented students from other parts of the country, the world. And we have a small amount in Cambridge, but in other parts of the state, Worcester predominantly, they're seeing a high increase of immigrants coming from other parts of the country. So we're trying to be welcoming to those students because every student needs to be educated.
On the MIT GSU side, what aren't we fighting for? In many respects, our contract is trying to cover both non-economic and economic proposals. We actually are going to bargaining on Thursday and Friday, funny enough. And I mean, literally today we're having like a town hall, and today, tomorrow, and Wednesday on a lot of the issues that we're seeing in MIT kind of like stalling on. Today was about harassment, discrimination, and bullying. We want a strong grievance procedure to make sure that we can actually address those issues that have such a huge impact on some workers' lives. Because if for instance, your professors telling you like sexist jokes, what kind of like mental toll does that take on a woman worker? Like, how do you expect to do your research if you kind of feel like your professor is simply looking down upon you the entire time? Tomorrow is going to be, I think, lab safety and workplace and lab safety. Like, we're doing cutting edge research across the campus. Yes, we have folks who are just working on computers all day, but we also have people working with some dangerous chemicals, and there's no real procedure for what happens if someone gets injured. What happens to their insurance. Are they covered? Does MIT help them? Are facilities actually proper and sufficient for dealing with these type of chemicals or these types of equipment? On Wednesday, we're talking about international student workers' rights, like the fees they have to pay out of pocket just to stay here and work here, and the type of intimidation they may feel trying to speak out about trying to improve their working conditions. There's so many issues along those lines, and a whole host of other ones in the contract about job expectations, work hours. On the economic side, again, salary is always a huge one, having cost of living adjustments, because we all saw what like inflation was looking like for the past couple of months. Our salaries are not cutting it. We're looking at more affordable housing, because again, MIT is, our landlord for those on-campus housing, and they're charging basically 70%, 80% of our stipends in rent. Just to live in one of the dorms on campus, that's ridiculous. They know exactly how much they're paying us, and they're charging us that much. So many issues with health insurance as well. It's a whole host of issues, and we really just want to make sure that they understand that we are the people who are really giving MIT the prestige in the first place, with our research, with what we create, and we deserve the respect and the dignity to live here. But yeah, I'm excited for bargaining. I'm really hoping that the actions that we're taking forward, like this week, really shows them that we're not messing around, that like these are important issues to every single one of us, and hopefully we come to the table not trying to play games.
The other thing I wanted to say, right now in Cambridge, we're trying this philosophy of open bargaining, because bargaining traditionally has been closed to the public, closed to the members. It's just been, the school committee on one side and the teachers union on the other. But the last round of negotiations, we were successful in allowing our own members to come in to sit during the negotiations, to be silent observers, so they actually see what's going on. Recently, there was a strike in Malden in April, and both communities had open bargaining where members of the public could actually come in and sit to see how bargaining was taking place. And that was very successful in Malden. That ultimately led to the teacher contract being settled in Malden, because members of the public from that community were in there and they got to see what was going on.
That actually leads nicely into another question I had, which was the role, particularly recently, of social media and just being able to, as you said, in the bargaining room, being there, having observers, but certainly social media makes that exponentially larger. So what have you seen? Has that been beneficial, do you think, to union organizing, both in terms of getting workers to organize and to rally, and or to the public perception and pressure on employers and management?
Well, I'm Gen Z, so social media is kind of like my thing. But I would definitely say social media is a massively helpful tool, not only disseminating information about the stuff that we are putting on, like the town halls, announcements about department-focused meetings, and just like providing updates about who's on the bargaining committee, what's happening at the table, but also really highlighting how much of a movement across the country that like unionization, at least everywhere, playing anywhere, but like specifically with like campuses and everything, like how widespread it actually is. I don't know if folks have heard about what's happening with the University of California right now, with like 48,000 student workers literally on strike right now just today. 48,000 people are literally saying we're not working until we see like movement on our contract or just better working conditions today over at all 10 campuses of the University of California. Social media has allowed that information to like disseminate and spread across the country. And now it's like, yo, we're not just alone over here in Cambridge doing this stuff with MIT GSU. It's like folks over there know exactly what's going on too with their fight and wanting better research and living conditions, and they're putting action forward. And seeing that not just at University of California, but literally just across the country has been so inspiring. And in times where it felt like, yo, we're just not getting the type of traction we want, we're not seeing this really working out, it's huge to see that, like, no, this is something big. Because everyone wants better lives, everyone wants better working conditions. Like, people are ready to move, and it's really, really inspiring. And it's definitely helped with the public perception of unionization, like broadly, not just in the education sector, but just across all labor, labor areas. It's like we're all kind of all in on the same fight for like a better life, which is just really cool and inspiring, and like kind of helps when it feels very difficult.
So this is an interesting question, because right now, next door to the high school, the school committee and the CEA bargaining team is trying to come up with ground rules. And one of the ground rules that the administration and the school committee is presenting is in essence a gag order on social media. So for us in the union, it's very successful because we have rallies, we have 10-minute meetings in school buildings to talk to the rank and file members about what's going on. And so when the administration doesn't want you to do it, you know that it's successful. So it's very successful.
All right. So I know that this answer may be a little bit different, your perspectives may be a little bit different on this, just because, Bobby, you have been here in Cambridge and in the union for quite a bit longer than Jonathan has, and I'm curious to know, I think both perspectives are going to be very interesting, but how have you seen the pandemic affect unionization, both the issues that you're dealing with and the way, the procedure, the process?
So it's very interesting right now in the United States that unions are at 73% rate among Americans. It's the strongest it's ever been since 1963. So for us in Cambridge during the pandemic, we had Zoom. And it was very successful for us when we had our monthly executive board meetings, when we had bargaining sessions, when we had specific committee meetings for professional development, benefits, whatever. There was more member participation than there has ever been. And I know that too personally because I'm also on the board of directors with the Massachusetts Teachers Association. And during the pandemic, we had weekly Zooms from all locals across, the 400 locals across the Commonwealth, and we had 800 people online, and that's very successful. So it does work.
Yeah, I could co-sign to just the accessibility that Zoom has created for like having like union meetings and just getting more and more people involved. But I will say it's definitely kind of difficult to get like that sense of solidarity and this community that everyone's in the same room together. Everyone is kind of just like a screen with like half the cameras off, because admittedly, man, like at the end of the day, I'm tired and I don't want to be seen. Like, it is what it is. But definitely, I'll also say because of the pandemic, I think remote work has also kind of been a bit of a challenge because a lot of people on campus can't do like work virtually and at home, so it's been kind of difficult whenever you want to do like a walkthrough, for instance, through labs, kind of stay in contact with people, because they're just not on campus to really have like conversations that we need to about what's happening with the bargaining and like the union and stuff. So kind of getting more creative with just how we disseminate information, like using social media and just informing people. Definitely, yeah, it's a bit of a challenge, but it's not impossible because at the end of the day, we know what we have to do and get everyone involved. So, what else? Yeah, I think that's about it. I think that's like the biggest thing.
The other interesting thing too is back in 2018, the Supreme Court ordered Janus versus, I think it was the state of Illinois, and it was some person in California. So for public sector employees, up until 2018, you were required to be a member of the union, or you had to pay a agency fee or a service fee. And so, unions were very concerned back then because we thought that, union membership was going to be voluntary. And that wasn't the end. People are wanting to join a union. It may take a while. It involves, one-on-one conversations, telling what a union is about. A lot of people don't know what a union is about, what unions have done for them, what can they do for you. And in Cambridge, we represent, the labor part of it, but also the professional organization and now the social justice organization. And we restructured our whole association, so we added 4 vice presidents for professional practice, for social justice, and for labor. So we have specific areas that members have concerns that go to those vice presidents.
That brings me, that brings me to my next question, which is somewhat related, and I'm wondering about the dual pandemics, right? We hear about the COVID epidemic, and then we also hear about the pandemic of racial injustice, or really the renewed attention to it. not that it's a new pandemic, but something that's been called to our attention in the past couple of years especially. And I'm wondering how that has affected, if you see that that's affected your work and your identity as part of a larger movement. You've both kind of touched on that with the discussion of social media, but with the Black Lives Matter movement and pushing for social justice, particularly among younger workers, but certainly across the spectrum, there's been a renewed interest in a larger identity. So you're a Canterburygian, you are a worker in your local place of employment, but you're also a member of a statewide, nationwide, and global community of educators, of researchers, of whatever your sector is. So I'm wondering if you're seeing those concerns about social justice and that coming to the forefront, if that's changing kind of what you're pushing for across the board, and also if it's changing your sense of identity as a worker, that you feel connected to people in different areas and different walks of life in a way that you maybe didn't before.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, as like workers and the people who really like are giving MIT its wealth, its notoriety, its name, like, yeah, it's very much like a kind of like solidarity and like unifying force across campus, I would say. I think a lot of my energy very recently has been kind of trying to find ways of really expressing how like the contract proposals that we're putting forward are meant to really improve the lives of everybody out there. Especially with my like the Black community at MIT, I've been trying to really put a lot of energy in trying to get more folks involved with union activity, with organizing itself, because like fundamentally what we're trying to fight for with our contract, I mean, just affects the lives of Black student workers like across the board. I think a lot of energy put into, for instance, like diversity, equity, and inclusion work at MIT, at least in my experience, has kind of rang hollow, in my personal opinion. A lot of times, a lot of strategic statements and strategic action plans have kind of resulted in nothing, a lot of pomp and circumstance for a day, and then, hey, a couple months later, what's the progress? None. But kind of, not reformatting, but really kind of like seeing these contract proposals, for instance, for a grievance procedure as a way of truly making a more equitable MIT in like a very material, concrete way, as a way to really express to Black students on campus how like, this matters. Like, you want to talk about, how do we fight racism and fight discrimination on campus? Let's have an actual process that lets us like get the justice that we deserve. We want to talk about increasing equity for everyone on campus. Let's make sure everybody has like a livable wage. Let's make sure housing is affordable. Let's like make sure that we're actually like making sure people are like fed here. And through our contract, it's really the only way of coming together and making that happen. Because I've seen it for years since undergrad that like a lot of times MIT will just talk. MIT will just put words on paper or put massive posters and everything on the wall talking about belonging. But when these incidents happen where it's like, MIT, Black people don't really feel very safe here or feel very welcome here, you hear crickets, or you hear them say, you can just go through this process that results in nothing. So really looking at this contract as like, this is our concrete way of really making the changes, not just for us as workers at MIT, but us as like Black people at MIT, us as like Latinx people at MIT, us as like Asian people at MIT. Like, it matters on so many levels, and it's really like that unifying thing I really hope to express to as many people as possible with like, organizing with everybody.
For me, growing up in Cambridge and now working in Cambridge, Cambridge right now is a minority-led school district with students, and only 24% of the teacher force in Cambridge is minority. So there's a problem. Cambridge, that has been one of the issues that Cambridge has really been trying to get up to 28%, but then the pandemic happened and it's down to 24%. Black and brown students, educators are not going into the education field. And then in Massachusetts, you have to pass the MTEL test. That's the Mass Teachers Educators Test. And the Commonwealth has really done nothing to promote having minority teachers in education. Boston has the best, Cambridge, and then Worcester. So right now, I know for me personally, I see these Black and brown kids, Hispanic kids, and my principal in my building has really made that a focus to hire people of color. It has been an issue, and what happens is they last a year in Cambridge, but then they'll go to Boston because Boston pays more, or they'll go to another school district. So it's a competitive thing. So in essence, the Commonwealth needs to do something to take a look at the standards of becoming teachers to really promote that in the classroom.
So I have a couple of individual questions, and feel free if I ask the other person a question and you have something you want to jump in on. But my first question is for Bobby, and I'm curious to know, because especially when you work with younger children as you do, teaching and being a paraprofessional and working in education is seen largely as really emotional labor. And we've done some discussion and some articles about the history of essential workers. We did that in 2020, who were considered essential workers in Cambridge. And one of the groups of people that we looked at were educators, and particularly for teachers of younger students. There was this feeling throughout the 20th century, certainly when there were threatened strikes or other labor actions, and a lot of those were women that were teaching younger kids, but the sentiment was, you are supposed to be selfless in service of your students, and so taking some form of organized labor action or strike is seen as contrary to or betraying your oath as an educator. So I'm curious to know what your opinion is about that, and also the effect that parents seeing what really goes into, especially elementary education during the pandemic, at the fact that has had on sort of public perception of what educators do and whether or not you are entitled, quote unquote, to take those labor actions.
So in Massachusetts, public employees are prohibited from striking. However, recently we've seen Dedham, we've seen Brookline, and now we've seen Malden and Haverhill go out on strike. And they had to face the consequences. Those locals were fined, and they have to come up with that money. In Haverhill, it was $200,000 fine from the Department of Labor Relations Board, and then also another $200,000 for the district, for the police details, for the meals and stuff. And so for me to make a really close decision, I need to know all the facts and the amount of time that we don't have a contract and the percentage of members that actually want to do that. I will tell you, we're in this movement right now where the new generation of educators, they just want to say no and they want to go on strike. Whereas you have the veteran teachers that are hesitant, and so there's a little conflict right there. But if the local was to have an 85 or 90% strike vote, I would be willing to go on a strike with them, because it's all about union power, and what's good for one union member is good for all union members.
So Jonathan, my question to you is that you are coming from a different perspective in that you are here at MIT and in Cambridge for a shorter amount of time, and you are working with older students, young adults, and I'm wondering what effect it has on unionization that your cohort, the folks that you're working with, are for the most part only here for a limited time, and that turnover of students. How is it to organize a union when the actual membership, the union is long-lived, hopefully, but the actual individual membership turns over quite quickly?
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up at some point, because that's huge. That's huge. Like grad students, you have folks who are either there for like 2 years, like me, and folks who are there for like 6+, and that's pretty big in terms of like who do we want to really establish as kind of like union leadership, because we want to make sure that's like very consistent. But I think acknowledging that turnover, when it comes to organizing, there are definitely folks who try to talk to who are just like, you know what, it sucks right now, but I'm only here for like another year, I'll just tough it out and not really get involved or off the sidelines, which is like annoying personally, but hey, I get it. that's not what I'm gonna do. But still, that's of course like more conversations. I think our approach there is really just like trying to find like leaders, really like building people up to kind of understand that being involved and getting off the sidelines and really being a part of this larger movement matters more than just like your own personal experience. Like, yeah, I would love to see like a raise, that'd be dope. But like this is bigger than just like you as an individual here. It's literally just about the lives of everybody coming after you. This is for the lives of all the PhD students who are going to be staying here for 3, 4, 5 years after you. This is for every incoming student who now understands that, yo, MIT has a union. MIT grad students have a strong union that will actually fight for them. That's a huge part of, like, I'm surprised that they haven't put that into, like, admissions material or anything. That, like, hey, not only do you get to come to, like, such a top of the line university, but you actually have like an entire union there of your fellow grad students who actually fight for you, your rights, for your living conditions, and make things better for you. Like really having a strong union is so important that like really taking that time to build with each individual, in my opinion, is kind of paramount, no matter how long they are there for. For folks who are like in PhD programs, I think it definitely makes sense to kind of prioritize. It's like, hey, we want you to be like a leader and kind of have like that longevity, but even for the folks who are there for 2 years, for the folks who are there for 1 year, just really activating them and really getting them to understand that this is like a collective struggle, regardless of whether you're still at MIT or you're at like another job. Like building that fire within them is so important. So yeah, really kind of having a very intentional structure and like pipeline to really help build people up and get involved in organizing activity is super important. And something we're really trying to build up now that we're like established again for about like 7 months at this point. So yeah.
The other thing I just want to say, I was telling you earlier, Beth, is the average teacher stays now 4 to 6 years. When I was in school, my teachers made a career out of it, 25 and 30 years. So that's something that both the unions and the school districts and the state needs to look at, because people are just, they're not staying in the profession that long anymore. So it's similar to, like an undergrad, student.
So building off of that, my question is how the unions and how you see yourself as part of a union, as part of a workers collective, how that addresses the whole person. And we think of that as kind of a new idea, but in fact, if we look through Cambridge history, really from the later part of the 19th century and all the way through the 20th century, people identified very closely with their unions, not just for their work, but for their social life, for their sources of support, financial support, emotional support. They really formed these worker communities. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you feel in your work now, and if you feel like your union contributes to that or really recognizes all of the different aspects that you bring to your work, your family, your economic struggles, your housing, all of those things, and how that is encompassed in the union mentality.
Yeah. Sometimes I worry that like around my lab and stuff, I'm just seen as like the union guy. But I've kind of come to the realization that like that's a badge of honor, if anything, because I know that I'm fighting for every single person I see around the school. And I shouldn't be ashamed of like being like, I want to have a conversation about what's happening with bargaining and why it's important for you to get involved. If you're not at the moment, just want to make sure you're informed. Because again, at the end of the day, we're not winning unless we have basically everybody involved. Every strike vote I've seen has been like 90% plus. So like, I can't be afraid of having these conversations with people at the end of the day. But when it comes to how the union kind of affects me as like a whole person, I'll say absolutely the like root word of like community is like unity. So like I see like community and like the union as kind of one and the same, because it's important that like the people that you're organizing with, the people you're struggling with, are also the people that you really like enjoy talking to, that you also like are able to decompress with and also kind of go through the very high pressure times with, and can really support you through it all, because that trust is what really has people getting off the sidelines. It's not just some random person coming telling you that like, hey, this is super important, you need to get involved. It's like, I trust you enough that you have my back and that me getting involved with this won't end up like blowing up in my face. It's actually like contributing to like a large thing to me. So I would definitely say that a lot of people in the union are definitely like my friends. They've helped me out in like very tough times. Again, cost of living out here is mad expensive, and like I'm definitely kind of tight on cash, and just asking for help has never ever felt like too high of a barrier. They've always just kind of helped like just like pulled up and like sent me something. That means a lot to me. And definitely there are people I can just like grab a drink with after a long day of work and just like talk about whatever. And like, yeah, just building with people is such a great way of like building relationships with people. So definitely say like the root of like the union is first community. It's really important to establish that. And we're trying to do that a lot more like more social events and stuff too, because we really want people to not like look at the unions like as a third party, just like these weirdos coming in and nowhere. It's just like we're literally y'all. We're literally like your coworkers. We're literally people going through the same experiences as you. We're chill. We're cool. We're fun people. And we're also fighting for a better MIT throughout the entirety of like our state here.
So that's something that's going on right now in Cambridge, in the public schools. You know, the 1,300 members always thinks it's just the officers and the contract committee and you know, the executive board to do all the work, but we're not the union, they're part of the union, and so if they don't get involved, then what would the union be? So we currently have monthly socials that we've seen an increase in attendance. We vary between restaurants and establishments in the city. People come and socialize, but we also talk about a specific issue that's in the contract. A big issue right now is paid family medical leave. Right now, the city does not have to abide by the current law in Massachusetts because municipalities don't have to. But Cambridge, as of September 1st, teachers will get 8 weeks of paid family medical leave, so it affects every single person. But now it's our job to make sure that we have the paraprofessionals, the clerks, and the secretaries, and the substitutes. So it does take time, but once you have these meetings with people and they know the issues and what it's all about, and if it affects them, they'll be there to show their support.
And on the sort of reverse side of that, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that would also impact that sense of solidarity that you've built through unions would impact how you all work together, especially in areas like a dangerous lab potentially, or working with at-risk students with special needs. That would help you reinforce the community that you're building through the union and that you need to perform your job.